Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. We
Hi,
have
guys.
such an awesome guest today. We have Kelpie Wilson of Wilson Biochar. And she has a new book out too. We're going to talk about that. So this is going to be outstanding. It's going to be such a fun live. Just make sure when you ask questions a little later, they're all in caps so we can see it. So we're going to put our 6 inches of soil video on, and then we're going to get started. People are strolling on in. We have people from all over the world watching this broadcast, which is really, really awesome. So if you guys on LinkedIn, if you guys come to YouTube, check out Grow Big TV. Please like and share and hit that bell. We appreciate it. Okay, 6 inches of soil. This is going to be an epic live tonight.
6 inches of soil feeds 8 billion people.
We already grow enough of all the human essential nutrients to feed everyone who's alive.
Farming is the single biggest cause of biodiversity collapse, the second biggest cause of climate change.
Soil is the most valuable resource on the planet, and we're degrading it without even realizing.
We have come to believe that money is more important than soil. That idea has to change.
Regenerative agriculture is farming that we're producing food, but also farming in harmony with nature.
We're working with nature, not against it.
The more people see it, the more that they realise that it works.
Having a regenerative agroecological system, that is surely the solution.
Soils are absolutely phenomenal in the amount of carbon they can store.
What we absolutely need now is urgent action from the government.
Until you deal with 9 retailers who have 94.5% of food sales in Britain, you're not going to have a level playing field.
Consumers have a choice. They can decide to buy cheap meat from industrial farms, or they can find farmers that really value animal welfare and the environment that we're farming in.
Dad started regen farming for the future generations to come, and that was the most selfless act he could have done.
The people who are doing this are making big sacrifices.
I think the potential is absolutely huge here.
These farms really can change the world.
It's all about the soil, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Boom. right, Lewis. Boom. Boom. So welcome in, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here and sharing this out. Yeah, this is going to be amazing. I can't believe we got people all over the world, from India to Australia. Okay. Oh no, I did it again.
Hey, I want to let you know that Billy Van Kuren is in the house of LinkedIn. So thank you for being here.
Sorry, guys. 1 second.
Did we
We got
lose
a
you?
commercial playing.
Oh, what happened?
Well, there's a commercial.
Oh, it's a bra commercial too, of all things. Like, really?
Well, yeah, out of all things on YouTube, that has to show up.
The
Wow,
only
what a
bras
cut
I want to
introduction.
see you guys use this summer is ones for your melons. But
Okay, well, I got a couple things, guys. Thank you for all the members. We have four forms of memberships: Biochar, Boom Club, Grow Big TV, and Master Gardener. We have 6 contests: watermelon radish, Detroit red beet, Dr. Richie's tomato, zucchini, and the largest sunflower. I think I might have messed up one there, but there's 6 contests. And you guys can win $100 by growing the biggest vegetable or flower, which is pretty cool. So check
and
that
it ends,
out.
what ends today?
Oh, it ends today, guys. All contests ends today. So if you don't enter, you don't put all in under the video, we can't accept you.
You're out of luck.
You're out of luck. Also, Tim Steckel on LinkedIn has something called Soil Your Undies. And we're going to add that on this channel. Soil Your Undies. Like, what could that be? Well, it's about taking 100% pair of underwear and put it in your soil. And after 2 months, to see what comes about it. What kind of microbes are working in your soil? So
what if
after
it's a thong?
What was that?
I said, what if it's a thong? How much
Then
microbes can be on
hopefully,
that?
hopefully that thong is all eaten up. Hopefully there's no more thong. So we'll talk more about that later on in another video. But it's called Soil Your Undies. But it's all about the microbes. We're all about the microbes. So let's see what kind of microbes you have in your garden and enter the Soil Your Undies collab. And that's by Tim Steckel, who was on our show with compost. And he had a 30-day compost challenge too, which is really, really awesome. Okay, so, well, let's get back to our interview. So we have Kelpie Wilson. Kelpie Wilson is a mechanical engineer and analyst with 35 years of experience in renewable energy, sustainable forestry, and resource conservation. She has been actively involved with Biochar since 2008. 2008. How old were you, Corky?
In 2008?
I know, it makes you think a little bit, right? Yeah. The only thing I know is time flies.
Hey, I don't even want to think about it because in 10 days, I'm going to be 40. I don't want to think about it.
Well, I'm 54 and 2008 seems like yesterday. But after you think about it, it's like, oh man, I'm getting really old. But since 2008, she's been involved with Biochar. So this is going to be great. She has worked extensively in the field of biochar, research and applying it for various clients and communities. She has also gained practical knowledge through her own homestead in Southwest Oregon. She's also an author of the Biochar Handbook, and that's just coming out now. So we're going to ask a little questions about that handbook. And because you know what? We've been talking about biochar here and there for the last 3 or 4 months because to me, it's almost like putting everything in the building block to just continuously grow your food year after year after year.
It totally redid one of my beds, and biochar was definitely part of that. So definitely, it's been, not only is it something that we're talking about, it's definitely something that we are both using in our garden as well. So, and
the thing that we never talked about is, okay, we talked about biochar, but how do we apply it? What's the bad about it? What happens if we put too much or too little? Is there any such thing? I don't know. We'll figure that out. Is it good, better up top, on the bottom? Is it good mixed? I don't know. We'll find out. She also has the Ring of Fire, where here's this kiln, and it's large, it's huge, but you can put it in your back of your truck and easily transport it wherever you go. So hopefully you have a friend that has this. Hey, come on over. We're going to burn some wood and make some biochar. That's awesome. I think that'd be great. So let's welcome in Kelpie Wilson. Welcome in.
Oh, hi, guys.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. I saw you on LinkedIn. I'm like, hey, they might want to know about biochar.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm so excited, and it's going to be so educational for our viewers as well. So,
awesome. we truly advocate what it's here for. I mean, it's here. Everybody's using fertilizer and everything else, or applying whatever we have every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, month, where we don't have to do that. Everything should be compost. You know what? This is where I want to start with, is a healthy gut, right? And how do we get a healthy gut? Is a healthy soil. So you have all these problems in the world right now, right? All these kids having issues, adults having issues. We're all falling apart here. And everything starts usually with the gut. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're starting with the gut, well, we got to go before that. How do we create a healthy gut? Well, it's the healthy soil.
Yeah.
You have a healthy soil, you have a healthy plant, you have a healthy you, and you have a healthy earth. So everything it's a circle, it's a twister. It's a twister.
Well, the soil is like a digestive organ, so there's a lot of parallels. Yeah.
100%. Sure. So let's ask a couple of questions, because we always start off about the beginning. like what your family, all right? Do you have any brothers, sisters? What was your family growing up? What was your lifestyle? Did you grow up on a farm? Did you grow up in a city?
Mostly in the cities or suburbs, but my mother grew up on a farm in Indiana in the 30s, and she always told us stories about that, and I always thought I want to live on a farm. She'd talk about feeding the chickens, and they had no running water or electricity, and this was in the 30s, not that long ago. It's just amazing to me how much things have changed.
Yeah.
And of course, our agriculture has changed a lot since then. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yep. So I always heard those stories about growing up on the farm, and probably spoiled me for any kind of career in the city because I wasn't going to do that. And my dad also he was the gardener, because I think mom always said, "Oh, I'm done with that farm stuff. I don't need that anymore." But my dad would always grow a couple tomato plants and some green beans, and he not a lot, but just a little bit, just to keep your hands in the soil. So I grew up with that.
That's awesome.
Now, vegetable how big was your mom grew up on a farm, but what did you have growing up? Did you grow your own vegetables? Did you hate vegetables? Did you hate you're a kid? Were you one of those kids that I'm not eating that?
Well, I pretty much ate what they gave me to eat, but we moved a lot. So we lived overseas for a while because my dad was in the service. So we lived in Germany, and didn't have much of a garden there. But when we came back to the States, we lived in Virginia for a while, and then we lived in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is where I really remember the garden. I was a little older by then, junior high age, and just some tomatoes. And what I remember is my favorite summer meal, which was fresh corn on the cob. You just go buy it from the stand and just immediately plunk it in the water. Don't let it sit around. And then beefsteak tomatoes sliced with salt and green onions chopped up on them. And then a good hamburger from the grill with plenty of mayonnaise.
What kind of mayonnaise? What kind of mayo? Did you have
Hellman's. Hellman's, not Miracle Whip. Never Miracle Whip.
I got a quick story of that before we go. So, tomato or two sandwiches a day kept the doctor away, right? So we were going to Michigan, and I was asking from New Jersey to Michigan, and they're like, well, what are we going to have for lunch? And they're like, oh, don't worry, they have tomato sandwiches in Michigan. So I'm like, oh, this is great. So the whole about 8 hours, I can't wait to have this tomato sandwich. I go there, I tasted it, I'm like, what is this?
Oh no.
Well, was it no Hellman's?
Oh, the not good mayonnaise. Yeah, mayonnaise makes it.
It's Miracle Whip. You don't put Miracle Whip on a tomato sandwich. I'm like, oh my God. That was my memory, my first memory in Michigan. It was Miracle Whip.
That's funny. I have a giant jar of Miracle Whip right now in my cupboard, and my husband's saving it for tomato sandwiches.
I think that's good for Jell-O salad and stuff, but for tomatoes, you want Hellman's.
Yeah.
And so, what other kind of vegetables did you grow? What kind of vegetables did you grow that you liked?
Well, green beans. My dad loved green beans, and we all loved fresh green beans. And that's really pretty much all he grew, because he worked and he didn't have a lot of time. So it was tomatoes and green beans is what I remember. Maybe he grew some of the onions. And then later on we moved to Chicago, to the city, and then he didn't garden anymore after that. Then after he retired, he had a little tiny garden where he grew green beans. I think that's about it. But yeah, but I think I came of age, in the 70s, when there were sort of the back to the land movement was still a thing. And so I realized, oh gosh, there's this whole group of young people that want to homestead. And raise their own food and live in the country. And so kind of was aiming for that once I got out of school. It took me a while to actually get to the country, but that was definitely in the back of my mind most of my time as a young person.
So how did you get involved with biochar?
Well, I probably have to go back a little further than 2008,
Okay.
because so I ended up, I think, so I said I came of age in the 70s, so I'm dating myself.
You look great, by the way.
Thank you. But at that time we had an energy crisis, so there were gas lines. There was the OPEC oil embargo, and so that was when Americans first woke up to the fact that, oh gosh, maybe oil is not an inexhaustible resource. And I always had a scientific bent, and so I was very interested in this problem. How are we going to deal with the fact that oil is not going to last forever? And this was before climate change was really even a concern. It was just, the oil's great. It underpins our whole civilization, but what are we going to do when it's gone? So I ended up going to engineering school, and I got a degree in mechanical engineering from Chico State in California because I wanted to work on renewable energy. Well, by the time I got my degree, there was this was now in the 80s, and there was nothing happening, very, very little funding for solar or anything. And so when I got out of school, there weren't any jobs in renewable energy, and I didn't know what to do. But at that point, I had gotten involved in forests. So CSU Chico is in the Sierra Nevada, in the valley there, and we would always, go up into the mountains for skiing and hiking, and I just fell in love with the forests in California, the redwoods, all of it. And at that time, then by the late 80s, there was a movement of young people who were opposing the clear-cut logging of the big old trees, right? They were still cutting the old growth, 500-year-old trees. And so that really caught my imagination. And there were no jobs in renewable energy. So I said, well, I'm going to be a tree hugger. I'm going to go save trees. And that's what I did for a long time, actually all through the 90s. I ended up heading an environmental group called the Siskiyou Project here in Southern Oregon. And we just had all kinds of programs to kind of change the policy of the federal government around logging. So, I've been really cared about forests and worked to protect forests for a long time. And then in the 2000s, we started having these mega fires and being concerned about climate change. And I could see that these forests that we had worked so hard to protect were now going to be threatened by drought, climate change, and also the mismanagement of forests over 100 years where we had excluded wildfire. So there'd been a policy to go out, put out every fire as soon as it starts, thinking we were protecting the forests, but not realizing that these forests actually need fire. They're fire adapted forests. They're used to burning regularly. And
isn't that how some trees actually reproduce as well?
Yeah, there are. There's one tree called the knobcone pine, and it has a very tight cone, and that cone only opens if it's exposed to heat. So those are the trees that come back after a fire first, because they're like, hey, here we are, everybody else is dead, but our cones are happening. So they'll come back first. And forest ecology is fascinating, Corky. It really is.
Yeah.
So here we are now in this place that's full of fuels, very flammable. I live in a little house in the woods. Oh my goodness, it just made me rethink what I was doing. And so I kind of switched from running this environmental group to being a writer and a journalist and covering these issues, because I've always liked writing and communications. And it was in the course of that where I heard about biochar. At that time, it wasn't even called biochar. This was probably 2006 when I first heard about it. It was just called terra preta.
Yeah, talk more about that. That'd be great too.
Yeah, so terra preta is Portuguese for dark earth, and it's these soils that are kind of amazing that had just kind of been discovered really in the I guess, there were researchers who knew about them a little earlier, but they were just soil scientists were starting to pay attention in the early 2000s to the fact that there was a huge area of rich black soil in the Amazon. And during my work as a tree hugger, protector of trees, I had learned that, it's really tragic when you cut all the forests and the rainforest, especially because the rain comes and washes away all the soil. And then it's really hard to grow that rainforest back because those soils are really poor because of all the rain, and it's
Right.
tropical and heat. So there's not a lot of organic matter in the soil. It's just a red soil. All the life is in the living vegetation.
Yeah, and that's something I didn't even think about. Like, you would think that the rainforest would have better soil, but it really doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Uh, so that's why it's not good for agriculture. You don't want to clear cut the rainforest and put cows on it. You don't want to clear cut it and try to grow, corn or anything or a crop, because the soil it's just really, really poor and it washes away in the rain. And, the reason why it's so poor is because of that rain and the heat. So, but the rainforest can perpetuate itself because it's kind of cannibalizing itself all the time, right? So a leaf falls in the forest and hits the ground, and immediately something eats it, and then that thing excretes, and then the plants can get the nutrients from that. So the nutrients cycle really quickly, and they're not really stored in the forest. To contrast that, think about the boreal forests in the northern part of the globe, where it's very cold and you build up these huge layers of peat. So there's tons of carbon in the soil because it just doesn't break down quickly. So in our temperate zone, we're a little bit in the middle there. But back to the terra preta, it was very weird to find these black soils that could grow crops. And maybe some of you guys or your viewers have seen these pictures of, it's a montage, and it shows an excavation of the regular rainforest soil, which is just red, highly oxidized, and then the dark terra preta. And then it shows a corn crop above the red soil that just looks stunted and sick. And then above the black soil, huge, beautiful corn. So when soil scientists saw this, they said, this is not natural. And then they would start digging in the pits, and they would see their little pottery shards way down deep, like 6 feet. Like these soils are 6 feet deep. And their little pottery shards sticking out because people had made the soils. So, and they'd made them over thousands of years. And that was kind of an eye opener that got a lot of people intrigued.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was charcoal that was doing that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, that's not something, I don't know. That's crazy. It's not something you think about.
Well, here's the thing. They said, when I first heard about it, they said there's an area the size of France in the Amazon that has terra preta soils. I'm like, whoa, that's huge. How did they do that? Well, what it is really, it's distributed along the rivers. So there's the main stem of the Amazon, and then the Rio Negro and all these other big tributaries. And there's high bluffs that don't flood. In the rainy season, a lot of the low parts of the forest flood. But on the high bluffs, those were the permanent settlements where people lived. And so they had villages along, and it was like kind of a linear civilization. Kind of reminded me of like, I-5, or what's the big highway that goes on the East Coast, where it's just like city, 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 right? Like one long city along these interstate highways in some places.
Yeah.
And so that's how it was. People lived in this line along the high bluffs. So it was concentrated, and they would have their village. And then, there's a lot of people that were living there. There were more people living in the Amazon before Columbus than there are today, most likely. And they were, so what did they do with their waste? All living concentrated like that. Well, here's the theory is that they made beautiful terracotta pottery, and they probably collected their night soil, as people did before the flush toilet, and food waste, fish bones, all this stuff. And they would have cooking fires, and it's really easy to make charcoal in an open fire. And so they would put the charcoal and the ash in the terracotta pots, and then carry them out to the fields and dump them, and create the fertility that way. And over thousands of years, that would build up and create these soils.
Now, I live in an area that has extremely dark soils because I live near what is called, they call it the muck, or it's I don't know, it's a specific area where it was swampy at one point. So they actually grow sod there, a lot of it, and sell it. Is that like the same thing?
Well, there's different ways that carbon accumulates in soil, like the peat in the northern areas in those bogs. So it'd be a little bit like that, but the muck is a little different. But because it's wet, the oxygen doesn't get in there, so the carbon's preserved.
Okay.
There might be charcoal in there too. There's a lot of charcoal in soils in the U.S. Some of it from Native American.
Okay.
I think there's stories about settlers who would grow on the old Indian village sites because they were so rich with charcoal.
Wow.
Because everybody did this, pretty much around the world. And then there's also just, think about the most fertile soils in the country. They're in Iowa, right?
Yeah.
And for the most part, and other parts of the Great Plains states and the prairie states, because of regular prairie fires. So as those fires would roll through the grasslands every 5 or 10 years, they'd leave behind a lot of charcoal, and that accumulates over time. So I think that researchers have found that up to half of the carbon in the soil in Iowa is charcoal.
So forest fires, if it's done by Mother Nature, not by some jerk in the woods lighting a fire, it's actually good. It's a good thing. Although people live there, that's not good. Like, they're going to lose their houses and everything else. But as far as the earth is concerned and the forest, it's a good thing that we have fires because it makes better soil and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is here in our forest, and also in the Midwest too, the native people did regular burning that helped in the forest, help keep the understory open. So if you burn regularly, then the burns are cooler, and there's not a lot of what we call ladder fuels. So there's not little bitty trees that can burn and then catch the taller trees on fire, because the big old trees have very thick bark. And if a fire just kind of a cool underburn goes through, you might get a little charring on the bark, but the tree's going to be fine.
Yeah, like sequoias, they have a really thick, they're really big tree. Like, they ain't gonna go down very fast.
No. It gets in the crown and kills all the needles, then the tree's dead, and a softwood, some of the oaks and hardwoods can come back, but not the softwoods. So, it's like a maintenance thing. And there's a really big movement right now in the West to bring back those indigenous burning practices. And it's really good to see that recognition that, hey, these first people here, they figured out how to manage.
So basically it's a controlled burn. Basically. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, we did it. There's a lot of controlled burns all over here with the forest and stuff that I go through.
It's important to do that. I think I think that's necessary. I think that's a good idea.
Now
safe.
Now Canada last year, they had all these forest fires. Actually, forest fires all over the place.
It was horrible. We got the aftermath of some of that. Like, we didn't get the fires, but we got the smoke for months. It was horrible to try and grow anything in that.
Yeah. It was interesting because a lot of people had delayed harvest, and their peppers, tomatoes, very delayed, like September. That's when people started getting their tomatoes and stuff. And that was the whole Northeast. South of us, Virginia got affected by the Canada fires. I mean, it
Well,
was
now,
really
now you know what we go through every year here in the West.
Yeah, and it
well.
makes it hard. Like I just have a backyard garden. It made it hard that year. Like I think everything was at least delayed by 3 weeks.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
just nothing would grow. And I had my stuff in the ground, but they stayed babies forever. Like it was a long time before I got any kind of fruit or anything for my garden.
Yeah, that's hard.
I just couldn't believe the sky was like yellow. I mean,
Yeah.
Like brown. It was over newspapers. Every single newspaper around here had the sky with like,
Yeah.
what just happened?
Oh, I thought my neighbor lady was burning leaves. Like I woke up one morning, I'm like, why is she burning leaves? I'm like, doesn't she know it's like it's hot and like who wants to do that? I look across the street and she wasn't. It was just like smoke everywhere. Yeah.
Mhm.
Here I blamed it on my neighbor because I wasn't paying attention to the news.
It's always important to find somebody to blame it on.
So our channel is very laid back, and we want to be there for the beginning gardener, for the master gardener, and everybody coming together as one to learn off each other. So that's some of the most important things to us. We include everybody.
Oh, we lost her.
Just like that. After that question, bam, she's gone. She'll be back in a
I
second.
wonder if she hit the button because that makes it easy. Once you hit that button, it's like, oh, there she is.
There she comes back.
Welcome back. Oh,
there you go. We hit the button at the same time.
Wow.
Okay, so a lot of people know in this audience what biochar is, but not a lot of people. Explain in layman's terms to everybody in the audience what exactly is biochar.
It's a lot of things, and it's one thing. It's charcoal. And the official definition is biochar is charcoal that you can use in soil or that you can use for carbon sequestration. So that really opens up a lot of things. But I'm really focused on biochar you can use in soil, or charcoal you can use in soil. And so that kind of charcoal would have certain characteristics, like it wouldn't have toxic stuff in it.
Yeah.
And it needs to be made from clean biomass. Then, you know, there's a lot made from. You can make it from straw, you can make it from rice hulls, you can make it from manure, any kind of clean biomass waste. But it'll be very different depending on what you make it from. Wood biochar is going to be pretty much similar, and basically the easiest kind of biochar to use. But the other variable is the temperature that you make it at. So there's different ways of making it. And so for instance, barbecue charcoal, you might buy a lump hardwood charcoal for your barbecue. That's made at a low temperature. Whereas the charcoal that you can make in an open fire, it's made at higher temperature. It's made at the temperature of the flame itself, which is close to 2000 degrees centigrade. So not the biochar isn't that made at that temperature, but a flame can get that hot. And so it's the difference between, you know, barbecue charcoal might be made at 300 to 400 degrees centigrade, and biochar made in an open flame would be made around 600 to 700 degrees centigrade. And it's lighter, it's more porous. The high temperature biochar, it's a lot more like activated carbon. So it absorbs a lot of stuff.
I don't know why, but it reminds me of space rocks for some reason.
I don't know anything about space rocks. Are they good for your soil?
Light and airy and fluffy and.
Oh yeah, like pumice. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Ginger Ninja. We appreciate that. Thank you.
And then
Now,
the barbecue charcoal.
To get that great heat, you have to burn it up top, not from the bottom.
Yeah, well, can I go through how you do that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, 100%.
So the barbecue charcoal is going to be heavy because it's made at a lower temperature, so it still has a lot of the tarry, oily stuff. And that's great for fuel. It's not the greatest thing to put in your soil. So I prefer the higher temperature biochar. Although, the lower temperature biochar is not bad because that tarry oily stuff is microbe food, but you just need to know how to use it properly. So if you wanted to make the low temperature biochar, you could do that in a smoldering process. It's the way, like when I say charcoal, a lot of times people think, oh no, you're going to make charcoal, that's polluting and smoky and nasty. And they're thinking of the old way of making fuel charcoal, which is you pile up a heap of wood or you put it in a pit, cover it with dirt, you light one end, and then it just smokes for days as the heat kind of slowly moves through that pile. And then at the end, after days, you open it up and put it out. And so that's pretty polluting. These days there are like ovens where they make barbecue charcoal. You can make it yourself in a retort, just a closed drum with a little hole in it. But I prefer to make it in an open flame because it's so much easier.
Yeah.
And you get more bang for your buck. And you can do this in your kettle grill on your deck. So if you have an old-fashioned kettle grill that you would put charcoal in, just close the vents on the bottom and then get a nice stack of kindling wood and just stack it up in a kind of rick, a little log cabin kind of stack, and light it on the top and let it burn down until it's glowing coals. And probably everybody has seen this also at a campfire in a campground where you have those fire rings.
Mm-hmm.
And people make a big fire, and they're celebrating and having a great time. And then, doing a little of that. And then, they just keep throwing the wood on, and then everybody passes out, goes to bed. Get up in the morning, and it's full of ash, but you dig in there, you'll find lumps of charcoal. So that charcoal in the bottom got protected from the air when the fire went out and got cold, and because it was down at the bottom under all that ash. And so that's, with a little more control, that's how we make charcoal or biochar in an open flame. And so, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh,
But
that's okay.
I have like 100,000 questions in my head.
Yes, shoot.
So what if like you're just, your average hillbilly like me that, I burned some apple tree clippings or whatever from trimming my apple trees and cherry trees or whatever. And I didn't know what to do with them, caught them on fire. And now I have this huge ash charcoaly pit. Can I still use the ash and the biochar that I made? Can I use that together? Do I have to separate them?
Well, that's a great question. And it really depends on your soil and the pH of your soil. So wood ash has a lot of nutrients in it. It's got all the minerals that was in the wood. But, if you have an alkaline soil, you don't want to add a lot of wood ash to it.
Okay.
You can take that charcoal out and you could rinse it in water and rinse off most of the ash. Or, if you have an acidic soil, most soils you can add a little bit of ash. It's really just a matter of how much. So, test your soil, see what pH you have.
So I could probably use some of that around my blueberry bushes then, because they like the acidity.
They like acid. So that's, acidic pH is like vinegar, and ashes are the opposite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you just need to be careful how you use them.
Okay.
But if you kind of sprinkle it like salt around on your soil and not concentrate in one place, it's probably okay.
Okay. I won't be using it in my garden beds, but I have a food forest, and I'm all about trying to make better soil over there. So I thought about sprinkling a little bit of that in the areas around my food forest. So I don't know if that'll work or not, but
it's got minerals. It should have calcium, potassium, all that kind of stuff in it. But you can also, with your apple branches and so forth, you can make your fire, construct your fire so that it makes a lot more charcoal and a lot less ash.
Okay.
So that's what I like to teach people how to do. And to do that, First of all, you want David Gray here is saying you want to make it from dry wood, not green. And yeah, that's true. You'll get much better results if your wood's dry. So let it season, let those branches season. And then in the fall, when they're kind of dry, take them and just stack them up in a nice airy pile, with some air. And maybe if you have some logs, put them around in like a little teepee shape. So make a nice pile, not just a jumbled up pile. I see people's backyard burn piles and they've got plywood and, big mats of needles and leaves. And, they just build this pile to make a spoke. But right, you can make it really clean. So if it's nice dry wood that's arranged with air around it so air can flow in it, and then you light it on the top. And the reason for doing that is because if you light it on the top, the flame is there. And this is why I always have my little buddy here. This is little pyro. Okay, to remind me to keep the flame on the top, because that's going to burn your smoke. Because smoke is just condensed wood gas. And so if you don't have the flame there, the wood gas comes out of the wood, and instead of burning, it condenses and makes smoke. Okay. So a flame is just burning smoke. And so you light that fire on top. A lot of people think you have to light a fire way down at the bottom because heat rises. And actually that's a myth. Heat doesn't rise. So hot air rises, but heat itself is transferred by radiation or conduction, like directly touching it, right? Or by radiation, you can stand back from a fire and you can really feel the heat. Mm-hmm. So having the flame on top, it radiates all around. So it's going to radiate down as well. So the flame on top is like your afterburner to burn the smoke. And then it's providing all this heat that's radiating down and lighting the different layers of the wood on fire. And so you just let it burn from the top down. And when it gets to where you've got like a heap of glowing coals, just get your garden hose out and put it out. Okay. And you'll make a lot of biochar. So you can use a kiln or any kind of container if you want to preserve even more of the char, but just in an open pile, you can make lots of biochar.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all into making it myself because it's kind of expensive. I bought a huge bag of it last year because I didn't make it myself. It was like $22. It's kind of expensive. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, if I could just make this myself, mm-hmm. And I'll just use it and make it myself. And then that way I also know what's in it.
Yeah. Well, I think, the biochar you can buy is good quality stuff. It's probably more consistent. And if you're using it in a big farm field, you probably want something that's more consistent. But in a garden, it's fine. And then the other thing that I always recommend, though, is to take care of any inconsistencies is put it in your compost. That solves a lot of problems that people have had with biochar. So, for instance, if you add a lot of biochar all at once to a garden soil, it is like this sponge, and it will hold nutrients in the char, and it will hold on to them a little bit. So if you put a lot of it in there right when you plant a plant in the spring, and it hasn't had a chance to kind of charge up and get microbes in there and so forth, you could actually deprive your plants a little bit of nutrients. But then, after it ages a little bit, then it's all about giving up those nutrients back to the plants. But the way to get around that kind of problem is put it in your compost, because a lot of benefits there too.
Yeah. And my compost bin has lots of things in it, like chicken poop and, all that kind of stuff. So if I put biochar in there, that would be helping it along as well, right?
Do you have chickens?
Yeah.
Put it in the coop with the chickens.
Okay.
So that you always want to put it at the very beginning of the process. So a lot of people think, they've heard, you got to mix biochar with compost. Don't mix it with already made compost. Mix it with the raw ingredients. And if you manure animals, the best thing is to put it right in there in their bedding, right where they're doing their business, because the char is going to sit there and capture that, that manure, and it'll turn to compost right there in the barn.
Nice. Okay. Well, my chickens are going to have fun with that. I got some white chickens, so I think by the end of it, they might be black chickens.
They might be a little black if they fluff around in the in the charcoal.
Yeah, I'm sure they will do that, because I have a pile of compost, and they're in it all the time, and they dig giant holes and they fluff around in there. But I just let them do it because that's what chickens love to do.
Well, then you don't have to turn your compost. It's great.
They do it they do everything for me. That's
Put them to work.
So that white smoke from the biochar when it comes up, is that called actually white vinegar?
Okay, so yeah, so there's another thing, and I cover this in the book pretty well. It's called wood vinegar.
Okay, wood vinegar. There we go.
Yeah, and so there's a way to take. So if you can capture the smoke, and when we make it in an open pile, we're not capturing the smoke. We're not making wood vinegar, but you can take a container like a 55-gallon drum, and put wood in it, and then heat that over a fire, and then have a way to take the smoke. Have a pipe that takes the smoke off, and then you condense the smoke. So the wood gas condenses into the smoke, and then the smoke can condense into a liquid.
Kind of
So
like a
you want
film.
to catch it at a certain point in the process,
Okay.
where there's still some moisture coming off of the wood that mixes with the volatile matter, and it's like all these different chemicals, and they're acidic. So that's why they call it wood vinegar.
Interesting.
And it's got a lot of really interesting uses as a pesticide, and it all depends on how concentrated it is. So if you dilute it a whole lot, it stimulates the plant growth. And if you put it strongly, you can kill some pests with it.
And it's powdery mildew too, right? It controls like
Yes.
powdery mildew.
Yeah, it really works on that. It really does. Also, gray mold. Yeah. Very useful.
Yeah, I had no idea. That's really interesting.
I didn't learn about that until about 2 hours before the show. And I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Yeah, it is. And so in my book, I've got a little section on how to make one of those. I haven't done it myself yet, though. So, but I give you all my ideas. So I'm hoping some people will make these and report back, and we can figure out how to really do it right. But the idea is that you just take there's a lot of people that make meat smokers out of a 55-gallon drum. And I found a site online called Ugly Drum Smokers, where you can buy all the different accessories to take your 55-gallon drum and turn it into a smoker. And so you can hang your turkey in there or whatever and smoke it. And then when you're done with that, you can collect the smoke and condense it and have your wood vinegar. So that's my great idea that I'm sharing with everybody.
Nice. Yeah, basically you're doing two things at once, so that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find Jay Dixon's question before I wiped it out by mistake.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay, I see that. Activated char condensate, the wonders of wood vinegar. Yeah, there's some nice information online about it. It really comes from Asia. A lot of the techniques that I like to use in the garden that involve charcoal, wood vinegar, and things like that are from Japan and Korea, where they've been.
Whoops. It happens. She'll be back. She'll be back. This is awesome, isn't it? There she is.
Sorry about that. I guess
it's all good.
Okay. Did you find the question yet?
No, I can't find it.
I saw somebody asked a question about how to charge biochar.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Yeah, and so putting it in compost really is.
Sorry, guys, just one of those internet problems that we have today.
You could be having a storm too.
She's back. Okay,
I'm
you're
sorry about that. I'm gonna maybe put on my mobile hotspot and see if that is a better connection.
Okay.
Anyway, there's lots of ways to charge biochar. Compost is the easiest way, but you can also mix it with any kind of fertilizer, like a liquid fish fertilizer is great. Urine is a really good one. So I put a bucket full of biochar out where the boys do their thing and see if they'll make a contribution.
we put out the fire.
Right now, actually, I'm collecting a lot of it because my toilet broke. My toilet's been broken for a week.
Oh no.
Luckily, I have a whole biochar sanitation system. So these are buckets that have charcoal, and I separate the pee and the poo. And I don't use the poo in the garden, but it's amazing how much urine you generate in a day.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing how much I did last night. I swear to God, I was up every hour last night. I drank a huge thing of water before I went to bed, and I should have never did that.
Yeah, I know.
And Billy's trying to grow the biggest sunflower this year, so we just beat on sunflowers. That's one of the contests we're having.
It cracks me up.
So she's trying to get her hotspot going, guys. So now she just froze up. No, she's back.
Yeah,
She's
I
good.
just switched. Sorry about that. I just switched to my hotspot on my phone. I think it'll be more stable than my other internet. So hopefully we won't get
I
lost
want to
again.
show everybody your ring of fire.
Mm-hmm.
This is her site. Look how huge this is. This is great.
And you can see the smoke coming up out of there, but it's burning before it gets out of the kiln.
Wow.
Okay, so wood, you don't want any, like, you're cutting trees down, you're trimming everything. You want pretty much the wood laying on the ground. You don't want anything that's alive for it, right? That's what you mean by green.
Well, it's interesting, because we do so much vegetation management around here because we're clearing around our houses, so that we're more fire safe. We're doing fire breaks in the forest. I mean, there's just piles and piles of it. And it's hard to get it all the work done. And sometimes we just want to cut it and burn it because we don't want to have to come back. And so the first thing is we're not putting big logs in there because they're not a fire danger. So we just want to get rid of the small stuff that's flammable. And so if I start a kiln like this with some good dry stuff and get it nice and hot, then I can actually burn green wood. It's, you just throw it in one branch at a time. It depends a little on the species. Some species are just really wet, and other types of wood like manzanita, it burns just as good green as it does dry, really, because it has a lot of volatile chemicals in it. And when it dries, those volatiles, leave. So you have actually less fuel. So there's a balance between water and fuel, because it takes heat to evaporate water. But yeah, we can also burn green when we need to.
No,
yeah, I didn't have a choice. We had a hard time because it was a humongous pile of apple clippings and stuff like that from our trees. So it took us about a week to try and actually really catch that on fire.
Yeah, here's a tip, Corky. If you got just greenwood, you got to burn it. Start a small hot fire with the driest stuff you have. Don't try to burn it all at once.
Okay.
And just a small hot fire, and then just keep throwing branches on, because it'll be a lot cleaner. You won't get as much smoke, and it'll actually go quicker.
Okay.
Than lighting a big pile and watching it just kind of smolder.
Okay.
Now, with your ring of fire, right? How does it function differently than other rings? Like, is it easy to take off right away? Like, I see the bolts over here or on the sides. You just like twist and it comes apart. Is it that easy?
Yeah, it's all put together with thumb screws, wing nuts.
Wing nuts.
So it's got 36 wing nuts. And this is actually my old version that you're seeing here, which was a 3-panel version. I now have a 6-panel version, but the panels are a little shorter. But anyway, it works the same, goes together the same. Is there a new picture? I don't know. Yeah, there's the new one. So those are 6 4-foot long panels, and there's a little bracket that puts them all together, and you just put the studs through the flanges, and you put the wing nuts on, and that's the main inner panel. And then you attach the heat shields. That's what he's doing there, is attaching the heat shield. And the heat shield's really nice because it protects you from the heat, because this is a 7.5-foot diameter kiln. So when it's really glowing like that flame, that's hard to get near. So it protects you from the heat. It also improves the efficiency of the process by holding more of the heat in the kiln. So that's the reason for the heat shield. And yeah, and it just comes apart into these 4-foot long panels. And you can put it in the back of a little pickup. You can put it in the back of a station wagon. And no panel weighs more than 40 pounds. So I have a lot of women who've bought these who do this by themselves, So I call it the grandma kiln. Because even an old lady like me can do it. So
I love the wood in the background. I can see my dad saying, "Hey Joe, listen, you got the 4 o'clock to do this today. You're not eating dinner. Get all that wood burn."
That would take you a long time. That's a wood yard at a biomass power plant.
Yeah, I know. I'm just being funny. It's just something I can see my dad give me something looking at him. What are you, freaking crazy?
Yeah.
There we go. There's a good example here with using machinery here with the wood to the left.
Yep, you can load it with machinery if you need to.
And that's a brand you call by the color. Yeah, see the truck right here. It's just easy. Put it in there. Boom. Nice and easy. Nice and mobile.
Yeah, and that shows how well the heat shield works. Right? It's a huge difference. It really protects you from the heat. And
yeah, that's really cool.
There we go.
There's the harvest.
There's your harvest, all right. What's the easiest thing you could transport the biochar in?
I just put it in a wheelbarrow and take it to the compost pile. But if you're taking it, what I do a lot is I have a friend who has a pellet stove, so she's got all these 1 cubic foot pellet bags. And when we're harvesting it, it's wet because we put it out with water, so it's kind of heavy. So I just load it into these 1 cubic foot, old soil bags, whatever. Most of us probably have some old soil bags or pellet bags or something, fertilizer bags.
When do you know when it's time to start watering, like they have here?
When the flame goes out.
Yeah, okay. I'm just asking basic, easy questions here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you wouldn't know. So, but basically, when it's done, the flame goes out. And this is because a lot of people don't understand how you can make charcoal in an open flame, because it burns, right? It's going to burn the wood up if there's a flame. But here's the thing, is that wood burns in stages. So it burns in different ways at different times. So you have a piece of wood. I mean, just think of a match, right? You light a match and it's burning like a wooden match. And it flames for a while, and then it goes out and you're left with a little stick of charcoal. So with a piece of wood, you heat it, there's heat, and then there's flame, because the gas is coming out and the flame is burning. And then at a certain point, the flame goes out because there's no more gas, and then you got charcoal. And that charcoal burns completely differently because there's no flame. Like, think of your barbecue grill. You're looking at those coals cooking your food, and they just glow. They don't make a flame like a bonfire does, because the charcoal burns as a solid fuel rather than a gaseous fuel. So that's your opportunity to like cut off the process right there and save the charcoal.
Okay, so there's a lot of hype right now with biochar. Like a lot of people are using it. A lot of people are just now learning about it. How do I know if my biochar is working?
How do you know it's working? Well, so you've made some biochar, and you might not be too sure if it's actually going to be good for your soil. The first thing to do is check the pH of your soil. Make sure, that it can handle a little bit of basically liming. And then then you're not sure what to add to it, how to charge it, or, what other fertilizers to use with it. I've done a lot of just little pot trials in the greenhouse. I think that's a really good idea to understand how much you want to use, what other fertilizers you want to use with it. And they're pretty easy to do. You just, in the book, I have actually a real procedure for doing that, where you can get some actual data that's that you could hang your hat on, but you can just tell it visually as well, pretty much. So you take whatever whatever biochar you want to add to your, take a flat of, just regular flat, maybe a couple of flats with cells, and make a couple of soil mixes, one with biochar, one with your biochar compost, one with biochar and fish emulsion, or whatever fertilizer you're going to use, or biochar and urine, and then mix it at different rates, and just plant some plant.
Oh. Three, two, one.
And she's back.
And she's back.
Wow, I thought my phone would be more reliable. I don't know what's going on. So anyway, plant some seeds and watch them grow.
Okay.
Wickershire Project. How fine do you crush the biochar? Do you want for the garden cornmeal? Like, does refining make it better?
Yeah, it is good to have it. Cornmeal's is pretty fine. You don't necessarily need it that fine. I kind of like the grain of rice size, granular, because it's easy to mix. If you get too powdery and dry, you can make this dust that's hard to control. So little grain size, or even a little bigger, and you could crush it by just stomping on it, or you can crush it in a roller mill or a hammer mill or a garden shredder, or you put it in with the chickens. They're going to peck it to death, take care of it for you, or the cows, they'll crush it and mix it for you. So the reason to have it kind of a little bit smaller, not just big chunks, is more microbes can get into it, and reach the center of it. I like the bigger chunks though for a mulch. Like I put a big thick mulch of big chunks of charcoal around my raspberries, and it keeps the weeds down, and it holds some water in there for the raspberry roots, and they seem to love it. So, or I'll put big chunks in the bottom of a planting hole for a fruit tree, or in a pot, on my deck of flowers. I'll put big chunks just to help with drainage and kind of keep it sweet in the bottom of the pot.
And you want those microbes, guys. The more microbes, there's microbes already in the soil, but they're going to stay there with the biochar. They're not going to. They're going to change. It's great.
Yeah, my one bed, I'm all about microbes this year, and I poured spoiled milk in there. I did that, and then we have rabbit poop in there. I have chicken manure in there, biochar. I mean, I got it all up in there.
What are you going to grow?
Right now, I have carrots, lettuce, and radishes in there. So I can't wait to see what this is going to entail. And then when it gets a little warmer, I'm going to put cucumbers right down the center. So
Nice.
We're going to see how this is going to turn out this year. I'm excited.
Yeah, sounds good.
So Billy Van Kuren has a question. In a kiln, is 1,000 degrees an average temperature that you can reach with a pile?
Well, the way we know what temperature it is in the kiln, it's really hard to tell because I have one of those thermometers, those infrared thermometers,
Mhm.
and I can aim it at the metal on the side of the kiln, and it'll show about 700 degrees Fahrenheit. But if I aim it in the kiln, it gets the flames, and the radiant flames, they mess up you can't really get the temperature that way. The only really way to get the temperature is to put a thermocouple in there, and that's hard to do. But another way to tell what's really important is what was the temperature in the wood when the charcoal was forming. That determines the characteristics. And you can tell that by sending your char to a lab for a certain kind of analysis that just tells you how charred it is. And by that, you can know the temperature. And I sent some of my samples in from the kilns, and a pile is going to be pretty much the same because the char comes out pretty much the same. And it's formed at 650 to 750 centigrade, which is, I don't know, what is that in Fahrenheit? It's hard to switch back and forth. That's about 1400 Fahrenheit. So that's the temperature in that fire where the char is forming.
Okay. Just let you guys know, we're going to have something called Under the Microscope, and Everest Homes is going to do a video for us, 2 videos for us every month, which is really cool because
Oh, wow.
we're going to find out what's in our bags, what's in our soil, what's in this. So it's just something new that's going to happen with their channel in the next couple months. So very excited about that.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool.
Billy Van Kuren's asking about, hey, how do you know? Find somebody from Matt's Polish Regenerative Microscope course. And Matt's an amazing guy.
Oh, he is. Yeah, I have his book. I love it.
We do have a question. Rick says, is charcoal and biochar isn't different? ?
Well, so when people say charcoal, they're usually thinking of barbecue charcoal. And as I was saying earlier, that's made at a lower temperature, usually in an enclosed process. So that's how it's different. You can use that as biochar in soil, but I would definitely compost it first. And here's why. It's got degradable carbon in it. So the tarry oily stuff that makes good fuel, it's not poisonous to soil, but what it does actually is it causes nitrogen tie-up. So like if you put a lot of sawdust in your soil, your plants will be stunted because what happens is the microbes see that sawdust and they can eat it, right? And they can eat the oily tarry stuff left in a low temperature barbecue charcoal. And they go, yay, lots of carbon for us to eat, but we need some nitrogen to balance it out. So then they go and take all the nitrogen and your plants are deprived. So they don't do well. But it's all a matter of time. And, like the next season, the charcoal or the volatile stuff in the charcoal or the sawdust is all consumed. The microbes have died and released the nitrogen again. But that's one of the reasons why I say compost your biochar. Put it in the compost pile because anything like that's going to happen will happen in the compost pile and not in your soil. You want to put stuff that's already a little bit stabilized in the soil, not stuff that's still actively decomposing.
Thank you for all the people watching in LinkedIn. If you guys have any questions there, feel free to just put it in the chat. We'll try to get everything answered that you guys request. And welcome to Grow Big TV. I love LinkedIn. Absolutely love people there. It's we're asking for interviews once in a while. We're like, hey, you wouldn't believe who I just talked to today.
Yeah, a lot of great people.
A lot of great resources. Amazing. I absolutely love it. Did you ever think about doing like how they have weave fabric, but making a, you know how you have like weed fabric, right?
Oh yeah, uh-huh.
Right. Did you ever think, or having a biochar film where it could do like a as a weed fabric, but at the same time you could just plant in the center?
I have thought about it. There might be some people who have done that. You know, Kathleen Draper, I think you know who she is. She's really explored a lot of the different other kind of uses for biochar and, you know, and plastics and asphalt and electrodes. And I know when we were talking once a while ago, we were thinking of making she's made some biochar paper. And so I think, you know, we were thinking of that as a weed barrier that would break down in the soil. But I don't know if she ever did that or anybody ever did that, but I think that's a pretty good idea.
Because people are always looking for as a gardener, one of the biggest things you have that like you have problems with, you don't want to grow anymore, is weeds. Because you're constantly weeding. That's all you know, you want to garden, you want to enjoy gardening. But the weeds, you go all of a sudden your rows are higher than your vegetables because you just don't have the time to get out there. So if there was a way to add biochar as a weed barrier in some kind of way, and plus still grow it, like, you know, cut out little spots, whatever you need to do, just put your plant in there. That could be a tremendous.
Right. People use plastic, but you know, nobody really likes using a lot of plastic in the garden, you know, because you just don't want to use plastic, right? So that's a great idea, Joe. You ought to try it.
Quirky, grow big TV weed fabric. What do you think?
Made from biochar. I think it could be done.
I think so. Let's go.
Okay. Any investors? Because we'll need them.
We don't just need one. We need a few.
We need several partnerships.
Well, that's the fun thing about biochar is we're all still kind of learning about it, even the people who've been doing it a long time like me. So there's lots of room for people to jump in and try things and contribute.
Okay, so applications, gardening, because this is the question I get a lot. If we get a bag, say somebody gets something, we didn't make our biochar, we got it from something like this. How do we apply it?
Product.
How do we apply this to the garden, to your plants?
Well, if you're buying the product, are there instructions on the back of the bag?
Yes, but I wanted to ask you.
Okay. Well, so that's compost and biochar.
Yes. So you just mix it in with the dirt.
I would use it the way I would use any compost. It's just going to be better and it's going to last longer. That's one of the main things about it. You know, that's what turned me on to biochar at the beginning when I first heard about it, was like, oh, permanent compost, you know, because it's not going to break down like the compost that you use in the manure that you haul every year, you know, back-breaking work. So a little goes a long way because it's going to last.
Exactly. Well, you mix this with cow manure, right? And you get all those microbes there. They're not leaving. Right. I mean, how much money are you going to save? You know,
a lot. You know, I was kind of looking at what I spent on my garden, and so 1,700 square feet of garden beds. It's like 40 beds, and we have 2 families that we're feeding, and we grow all our own potatoes, onions, garlic, carrots, beets. You know, tomatoes. We can a lot of tomatoes, and I mean, really, I don't buy many vegetables. Maybe in the middle of winter, I'll buy some lettuce because I just want to have a salad. But yeah, as far as what we spend on the garden, make the biochar. I usually buy I use crustacean meal as a fertilizer, and I also use it's a complete organic fertilizer. It's got, you know, feather meal and alfalfa meal, kelp meal, those kind of things. So I use maybe 2 or 3 bags of that a year in all that garden space. And that's pretty much my fertilizer. I'll go through a little bit of fish too for, you know, watering things, fertilizing in the middle of the summer. But mostly I just put the fertilizer in when I plant. And, you know, I might top it up with a little watering with a little fish a couple times during the summer, and that's pretty much it. So I don't buy any compost. I don't buy any soil. And my garden's on a terrace above the river, so it's all cobbles. There's no soil to speak of. So it's all been built over time with compost and, a bit of manure. I've hauled a bit of manure in.
So, Miss Serena's question: worm castings are awesome, but go ahead. So, Grow Big TV, can you mix biochar and worm castings into soil, then water it? Or should you put biochar and water with a hose stocking filled with compost or to charge it first?
Yeah, so that's like a compost tea, soaking biochar in a compost tea or a worm tea. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that. I've never really done it. I just put it in with the worms. I had a worm bin for a while, and then I realized my compost pile was full of worms, so I didn't really need to have a worm bin because they're already out there. So I just make these big heaps, and I don't turn them. But you might have biochar. You want to try it now. You don't want to wait a whole year for it to go through the compost. So what do you do? How do you charge it? And I think I would just mix it with the worm castings and make sure it's nice and wet, and then just dig it into the soil. But you could also try that.
I like the fact that you said you didn't turn your compost bin, because a lot of people, they don't want to do that.
No,
they don't want to turn their compost bin. They don't want to do that extra work. They're already picked weeds, and that can just take everything out of you to go and have to take your temperature of your compost and turn it and all of that. It's sometimes a lot of work for people. So the fact that you say you don't turn it just makes me happy.
And what I do is I try to layer it. So in the spring, the first thing I do in the spring is I take the old compost pile and I sift out the compost, because there's always some chunks that didn't get composted. So I'll run it through a screen and just sift out the finished compost, and I'll get like 2 yards of finished compost. And then I'll, the overs, the things that didn't compost, go back on the ground. And then I'll build as I pull, I've got a lot of grass I have to take out of my beds every spring, and other, weeds and old plants. And I'll layer it. So I'll put down a layer of the green stuff. Then I'll put down some biochar and some rock dust. I'm a big believer in rock dust. And then another layer of weeds, biochar, rock dust, and make kind of a lasagna, the lasagna bed idea, but the compost. And so everything's kind of, there's something, it's mixed that way, and it starts working. And I'll stick a thermometer in it. It gets hot, but I don't see any point in turning it, because the biochar helps to aerate it, for one thing. And it's not like a giant municipal compost where their piles are so big that it'll get really yucky in the middle if they don't turn it. So, yeah.
Do you know, well, Billy asked a question, at farm scale, is there published guidance for amount per acre and number of times per year, taking current soil conditions to account?
Yes, I wanted to turn you guys on to some really good resources at the U.S. Biochar Initiative. So that's biochar-us.org. And they're doing a really good job of putting together fact sheets. And then you can find a link there also to something called the Biochar Atlas. And this is hosted by the USDA it's got started at Oregon State University. And you can go on there, and the NRCS soil survey. I don't know if anybody's ever used that. If you go to the Biochar Atlas, you can look up your land on the soil survey map and find your piece of ground, and you can put in, then it's like a tool. You can put in the crop you're growing. Is it corn? Is it wheat? Whatever. And they will give you recommendations for a type of biochar, an application amount. It's being developed more and more. but it's a great tool. And it's actually not on this website. But on this website, if you go to resources and biochar, oh no, this is the IBI. This is a good site too, but I know the USBI site more. But there's a lot of good information on the IBI site too. That's the International Biochar Initiative. But if you go to biochar-us.org, you'll find a lot more specific information for the United States.
Okay, hold on. Did I get the right
There's
one?
fact sheets. And then there's the Learning Center under Education. And this is also where you can find a directory of biochar producers if you want to buy it. The Learning Database. So here you can type in your topic, and you'll get a lot of different fact sheets. Like there's that plant bioassay. That's one that I put together, the practice guideline.
Oh, so I'm going here first. What do you want me to go to? I'm sorry.
Oh, just people know that there's this learning center. It's a database of different fact sheets. And then the Biochar Atlas is its own website. There's probably a link here somewhere to it, but I don't know where it is. So if you wanted to, let's see, the Biochar Atlas. People can just Google it.
Yeah, people could just Google. There you go.
Look for the Biochar Atlas, and then the Biochar Learning Center on the USBI site. There's quite a bit of stuff. So there's presentations from the old conferences. I mean, it's a little overwhelming, honestly. There's so much information, and it's like, well, what do I do for my situation? That's the hard part. And that's actually one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because I just wanted to focus really on what I had done as a gardener. And there's a lot of other information in there too, but I think, it's nice for people to see what another gardener has done.
Yeah.
And maybe you can learn something that would apply to your situation.
So Kaylin Strain says, I live in an upper floor with north facing deck. I have cans of nuts picked up from around here. Can they be good for biochar?
Oh, you want to biochar the nuts? What kind of nuts? I don't know. That would be interesting. They'd be pretty oily. Nut shells definitely can make really good biochar. Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to make biochar is to take something that's woody and not something that has food value. So I don't know. What kind of nuts? It would be my question.
That's interesting that you said that. Can a walnut be made into a biochar, or is it the toxins still going to be in there?
Well, that's an interesting question. So walnut shells, yeah, absolutely, you can make them into biochar, but you better cook them at a high temperature. And I'll tell you a story about UC Davis, big research institution. And early on, since I've been involved in biochar for a long time, I've been following what the research scientists have done to investigate it. And they've gone down a lot of paths, which of course, when you mess up or don't get a good result, it's a learning opportunity, right? So what they did at UC Davis is there's a lot of walnut orchards around there. And there was an orchard that had a gasifier that for energy that used walnut shells, and it produced char. A lot of different kind of furnaces end up producing char kind of unintentionally. They just didn't, they just end up getting char. And so let's try this for biochar. And so they did a field trial with the biochar, and they got terrible results. And so they're like, biochar is really not very good. Well, since then we've all learned that biochar is not biochar, right? It can be really different. And what they've done is, because the walnuts have those jugalones, I think is the chemical that's kind of allelopathic or poisonous in soil to other plants, they had made it at a low temperature that captured, and the process that captured the tar and oily stuff. So the char still had the jugulones in it, and that's why they got bad results. But if you make it in the right kind of process, those will all burn away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're allergic to walnuts, can you still use it as a biochar?
Like I said, you want to make sure that you make it in a high temperature process and burn all that gassy stuff
So
away.
Caitlin could, if she wanted to, burn all the nuts that she has. They would just have to be at a high temperature, so the oils and all that crap would be out.
Yeah, I don't think I would burn the nuts. The nut shells, yeah, but I don't think I would burn the nuts. Of course, you probably don't want to sit around and shell all those walnuts, but I mean, you can try it. Try it and do a pot trial. If you're allergic to it, maybe have somebody else do the trial.
So talk about the biochar handbook.
Yeah, so it's a book. I do a lot of workshops, have for quite a while now, and people ask me for more information, and there's lots of fact sheets out there, but I had also done a lot of my own experiments, and I wanted to compile them, so I made a little 100-page booklet that I was taking down to the copy shop and making copies and selling it at workshops. And after a while, I thought, this is kind of a pain having to go and make copies all the time. So I sent one to this publisher, Chelsea Green, which I have a lot of their books. They have great gardening books. And I thought, well, if anybody's going to publish this, it might be them. And they wrote back and said, yeah, we'd like to work with you on publishing a book. So basically, took me a year to get it all together. And actually, we just submitted the files to the printer today. So it'll be available June 27th, but you can pre-order it now. And if you know you want it, I'd encourage you to go ahead and pre-order it now, because that will raise it up in the rankings at the booksellers, and then it'll get more visibility. So go ahead and order it today if you can. But yeah, it's got let's see, there's a history of biochar, which I really had a lot of fun researching the history of biochar, not just about the terra preta, but all the different writing about it in the 19th century in Europe. People had discovered biochar, and there's a lot of neat articles about people using biochar in Europe. And then it kind of got forgotten about, right? And then there's a chapter on how does it work. So I go deep into the chemistry and of biochar, and how the different kinds of biochar and their effects. And then I have a couple chapters on how to make biochar. So how to make it in bird piles, how to make it in kilns, how to make it in little tin can gasifiers and 55-gallon drum gasifiers. And then I've got a chapter on how to use it in sanitation, one on compost, one on a chapter on wood vinegar, a chapter on I've got a chapter on forestry, and yeah, so trying to cover all the ground that I've been covering the last 18 years and share what I've learned with everybody.
I think it's very interesting, the history of biochar. Primitively, they would use it, and they didn't really know the chemistry of it all. They just used it, and they saw how it worked, and they liked it. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, you don't really need to know the chemistry.
Yeah, you don't need to know the technical stuff. They just did it, and it worked. And yeah, I absolutely love that. I think it's really cool.
So how does biochar affect beneficial microbes, nutrient cycling, and overall soil health?
Yeah, well, so this is where, getting a little bit into the chemistry of it was really interesting to me, because what I learned was when you take wood and heat it, and the volatile stuff, so that would be the hydrogen, the oxygen, and some of the carbon leave as a gas. The remaining carbon links up in fused carbon rings. So at a microscopic scale, it's got this honeycomb structure.
Okay.
And that's why it's so stable. So you think about carbon, it's got a lot of different forms. The most stable form is a diamond. That's pure carbon. And this charcoal is pure carbon, but they're very different. But the charcoal carbon has this ring. And the cool thing about it is not only is it stable, but it's electrically active. So because you've got 6 carbons in a hexagonal shape, and the electrons can go all around that. They're free to move around that. And so there's a lot of electrons that are available. And so microbes love it. So that's part of it. The other part of it is that I call it the electric carbon sponge, because a chunk of biochar has got all these little tiny pores in it, and surrounding each pore is a surface. And on that surface are these electrically active molecules of carbon. And the microbes come in there, and the electricity, there's an electrostatic kind of force that holds nutrients and water there. So a microbe shows up, and there's this surface. And they say microbes like to sit down when they eat. You know, they like to be attached to something. So they got something to attach to. They've got food, they've got water, and they've got electricity. So why do they need electricity? They need electricity because when this is the chemistry part of it, when they're metabolizing food, there's a reaction, right? To take food and turn it into energy for their life. At the end of that reaction, they might need an electron to complete the reaction. Or sometimes they need to give off an electron. And the neat thing about biochar is that there's also places where electrons can go. So it's kind of a two-way street.
Yeah, because like biochar is kind of like this light, airy, you said it's kind of like a honeycomb, has all these little, so yeah, it would have like all these little niches to go into. It's really interesting.
So is there any, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, nothing.
Every time I talk nothing, it's okay. I'm sorry, guys. Is there any potential drawbacks or unintended consequences related to microbial interactions with biochar?
Boy, you know, I've seen things over the years occasionally. Nothing really sticks in my mind as far as promoting pathogens. It's possible, you know, that it could promote some pathogens. It's probably mostly in some sort of really unique cases. What I see happening with biochar, and there's a lot of papers that show this, is when you add biochar to soil in the right way, you know, in a healthy soil or a compost, you're creating this habitat for microbes, and a lot of them move in there, and you get diversity. And usually when you have a lot of biological diversity, the pathogens don't compete. They might be there, but there's enough competition from other microorganisms that you end up with a kind of healthy ecosystem.
So the good outweighs the bad, basically. So the good outweighs the bad, basically.
Yeah. So basically, you know, you're just creating a habitat for biological diversity, and that just takes care of a lot of potential problems.
You know,
that's a good question, Joe.
We hear a lot of the good.
Yeah.
What's some bad things about biochar, or some things that, you know, if a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to put biochar, and they don't really know what they're really doing. And they add kind of like, what's the drawbacks? What's the bad things that people may do?
Well, don't add too much at one time. You know, you don't want to add too much of anything at one time to your soil, because it's this dynamic living thing, and you don't want to, you know, overload it. Like you wouldn't like add too much fertilizer at one time. You know, that can kill your mycorrhizae, you know, your soil fungi, if you add too much fertilizer. Right. So you don't want to add too much at one time. You also want to the main thing you want to look at is pH. I've had people put too much alkaline biochar in an alkaline soil and get stunted plants. So check your pH. That would be the main thing. And don't add too much at one time. I'll give you one downside. They were using biochar on fracking pads, and I think in the Great Basin somewhere, Utah maybe. So you've got these fracking pads where the soil's been disturbed, and there's some pollution, and they want to try to revegetate those. So they put some biochar in there, and a lot of it ended up on the surface. And what it did is, it's a dry environment, and it wicked the water out of the soil because it was on the surface. And so it ended up drying the soil. So if you're in an arid area, you want to make sure you put another mulch over the biochar rather than having a lot of biochar on the surface, because it does improve the hydraulic conductivity of the soil. So it can move water, it can hold water and move water down, but it also can move water up. If you got a desiccating wind blowing over the ground and there's charcoal there, it could wick water out of your soil. So that's something to think about.
Jane Doe just posted Broken Hearts Ministry. I just want to do a quick shout out. Broken Hearts Ministry, which is Gail, her sister passed away, and she was homeless. And she started Broken Hearts Ministry, where Gail goes out and feeds the homeless. And it's after her sister. So if you guys could check out Broken Hearts Ministry, if you could do a donation, that would really help out Gail and everything. And that means a lot to me too. So Broken Hearts Ministry. Sorry about that. It just, it's important. How can farmers optimize biochar distribution to achieve maximum benefits?
That is a great question. So you've only got a little biochar. You want to get the most bang for your buck. Band it in the seed row is one idea. So put it where the seeds are, put it where the roots are. You have to spread out in your whole soil. And, if you have a little bit every year, you add a little bit in the seed row every year, pretty soon you're going to have the soil well amended. So that's one idea. Put it in your starts, just put it in your potting soil to get the plants off to a good start, and then put them out in the garden.
Can you provide examples of successful biochar projects based on specific feedstocks?
Oh, well, there's lots of them. I don't know yet. So one of the ways that I learned a lot about biochar was I worked with a group called the Umpqua Biochar Education Team, or UBET, and they're up in Roseburg, Oregon. And they were just a group of enthusiasts who were just trying to learn about biochar. And there was a grant program from NRCS. They're called Conservation Innovation Grants. And we applied for this grant and we got it. And so we got $75,000, and we used that for a 3-year program working with about a dozen small farmers who had, small farms and livestock and forests. So what we did, that's where we invented all these kilns, actually. The Ring of Fire kiln, the Oregon kiln's another one. So we worked with all these farmers to take their woody debris from their woodlands and turn it into biochar, and then mix it with manure, and then use it in the ground. And we had great results, both with the animals and with the pot trials we did and the compost we made. We didn't get to do a lot of field trials, but we did do a couple field trials, and those turned out really well too. So I think what makes a successful biochar project, at least on the small scale, is one that's going to use the inputs that you have. So to me, that's one of the big values of biochar, is that it can help us do a better job of using the inputs that we have and save us money. So
So So we talked a little bit about this with soil improvement, but what other environmental benefits does biochar offer, like water filtration, carbon offset, things like that?
Oh gosh, yeah, lots. Well, holding water in soil is really important. You know, unlike the case I was telling you about where it wicked it out, in most cases it's going to hold water in soil, and the deeper you put it, the more water it'll hold in the soil. So that's a definite environmental benefit, especially here, in the West where it's drier, where you are, where you get more rain. If you have a clay soil, it can help open up that soil so it drains a little better. So
Okay.
that's a good environmental benefit. It's really useful in remediation of toxic soils. So it can absorb a lot of heavy metals, like lead and things like that, or kind of immobilize them. Also organic contaminants. There's a lot of people looking at it now for rehabilitating soils contaminated with PFAS. There's a lot of work looking at biochar for managing stormwater, and also in rain gardens and swales, because it improves infiltration in the soil. So you get compacted soil in a city, an urban environment, and then you get these rainstorms and you get floods, right? And so if you can improve the ability of the soil to absorb the water, you're much better off. And biochar just will loosen the soil and allow it to drain better. So there's been a lot of work. I think the Chesapeake Bay, there's been a lot of work in Delaware and around in the Chesapeake Bay on that. City of Minneapolis has done a lot of things in that regard. You can find a lot of that information on the USBI, US Biochar Initiative website.
Do you do any events? Do you do other speaking engagements? Like, where can people find you if you're speaking somewheres? Or
Yeah, mostly I do events for smaller groups like conservation districts. I've done some webinars. I've got a lot of recorded webinars on my YouTube channel people can watch. And, I don't travel a whole lot, but I can show up online if you want me to talk to your group or whatnot. And yeah, there's biochar conferences every couple of years. We just had one in Sacramento in February. And a lot of people who are more expert than I am in the fields of things like stormwater. There's some real professionals who are in that field who've done a lot of work. And so if that's your interest, you probably want to contact some of them.
So here, a charge or not to charge, and put that into this question. Should I put a little biochar in the bottom of a hole before I put a vegetable plant in it?
Yeah, usually what I do is I'll take my fertilizer that I'm going to put in there, feather meal or whatever it is, and I'll add a little biochar in with that and just mix it all in the hole. And that seems to work pretty darn well.
Okay.
There's one place where you don't really need to charge the biochar though, and that's if you're planting a legume crop. So probably the easiest way to get biochar in the ground is if you're planting, say, a cover crop of clover or field peas or something like that in the fall. Put your biochar in there because those legumes will fix their own nitrogen, and then the biochar will actually encourage the microbes that do the nitrogen fixation.
Oh,
that's
cool.
a great way to get started with biochar without having to charge it. Just put it in with a legume crop.
It's awesome.
So
Definitely going to do that.
Corky, you have any other questions?
I don't. She pretty much answered everything. And I'm really excited about the legume thing because I have biochar in with my peas right now. So
great.
Yeah.
That should work really well for you.
Yeah. I'm excited. I can't wait to see what this is all going to do. Like I'm excited.
And put it in with your chickens.
Yeah, I'm going to. For sure. Because they're gonna enjoy kicking that up for sure. They love to do that. So
Now, what happens with water with biochar? You know, a lot of the water we use has a lot of chemicals in it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that change anything with water, with everything that's in it these days?
You know, I'm not sure what would happen in the garden with like, I use well water, so it's not chlorinated. So
Yeah.
chlorinated water and biochar, I actually haven't ever thought about that, what it does. I bet there's some papers on it. I'm gonna look
Yeah,
into
because
that.
that would make me wonder if it would hold the chemicals for the chlorine in it and maybe do harm to your plants.
Wow, that is an interesting thought. I have not heard of anybody saying that. Biochar is widely used for water filtration, and there's a really neat project. A guy named Josh Kearns, he does water filtration in developing countries. He's worked in Mexico and El Salvador and other places like that, Thailand, where people just don't have clean water always. I mean, we don't always have clean water here either, So a lot of people do use water filters for that reason. But where you can't, if you're someplace where you can't just buy a water filter, he's worked with people in communities to make water filtration systems, just using a 55-gallon drum to make the biochar. And then he's got other techniques to improve it so it works better for different specific contaminants. And he's done a lot of this work and then developed these filter systems where it goes through sand first and then biochar. And so that can be life-saving for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, that's one of my real things that I'm really concerned about is, how can biochar help us be more self-reliant? What about in emergency situations where, we don't have electricity, water's been cut off, and we have to take care of ourselves for a week or longer. And there's a lot of ways biochar can help with sanitation, with our urine and our poo and filtering water. And then also the little stoves that I make that you can make biochar with, you can cook. So if you have a little bit of wood, you can cook, you can filter your water, you can take care of your waste, you can grow your garden, all with biochar.
Yeah, that's awesome. So many ways you can use it. It's really cool.
That reminds me, I wonder what with green sand and biochar and the benefits of green sand with that together, linked together.
Sand and biochar?
No, green sand.
Oh, green sand, like the potassium stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it's a good thing.
Yeah. I just thought about that. I'm putting everything together. Everything's starting to go like this part of the brain, now going to the back, now going to the side.
But it would probably store the benefits of the green sand.
That's exactly what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. That's like
Joe, are you in Jersey? Is that where you are?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, so that's where green sand comes from, isn't it?
Yes. Yep.
What
Putting
makes
things
that
together.
green sand?
I don't know. I think there's a place up north that actually sells. There's a company up north that sells green sand. Corky was looking for it in Ohio, and I'm like, I just went to Ace Hardware and got a big bag of it.
Yeah, you can't find that in Ohio. I have to order it off of Amazon.
So it helps loosen soil, improve moisture retention, soften hard water, and increases root growth. That's what green sand does.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I mean, what a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard anybody talk about biochar and green sand together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think green sand is used widely, though. I don't think a lot of people, one, know about it, or two, like, can get it as easily as you can.
It's also high in iron, potassium, and magnesium.
Ah, magnesium. Yeah, that's probably why I don't use it. We have magnesium in our soil already. That's pretty high. But the potassium, I've thought about using it for the potassium because I'm like, potassium doesn't last. You got to keep adding it. And there's some in biochar usually, but I end up using kelp meal and alfalfa meal for that.
So Serena has a question, and we have a Serena joke. Serena came in one chat and she made jokes the whole entire broadcast. And it was like, oh my, I want to read the joke, but I can't because we're doing an interview. So now she makes a joke at the end of the broadcast, which is pretty funny. But she comes up with some great questions. She goes, do plants need any other fertilizer or food once biochar has been added to the soil?
Oh yeah, you still have to add fertilizer. I mean, I don't think you need to add as much. It's just more efficient. Your fertilizer is going to go further, and but you don't. I don't know. I should try not using fertilizer. I haven't really tried not using it, but I just don't use a whole lot. But I want to keep feeding the microbes. The biochar really, it's the structure. It's more of a soil conditioner. It's the base, and it's going to keep your nutrients from leaching out in the rain. So it improves the efficiency of it, but it's not really a substitute for fertilizer. So yeah, so you still need to use some, but maybe not as much. Like, for instance, I haven't used manure in my garden. Last year I did because somebody brought me some goat manure, so I'm not going to say no, right? Before that, I hadn't used any manure for probably 7 or 8 years, and I was just using my compost with biochar and the little bits of complete organic fertilizer that I use when I plant, and a couple of waterings with fish emulsion during the summer. That's it. So, and my plants seem to grow just fine.
Yeah, if you use compost, just keep on adding that compost in there. You have biochar. You basically have everything you need.
Mm-hmm. What I've noticed, which is really the best, is that if you have garden beds, you might notice that every year they shrink. And then you got to add more, right? Because they just shrink. The soil gets used up. Mm-hmm. With the biochar, that's not really happening.
That's good.
Wow. Yeah, it's really maintaining, and some of my beds start overflowing even.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's the real thing, is you don't really have to add a lot of new organic matter. You add the compost for the nutrients and the biology. You don't really need to add it for to fill up your beds.
So this was Serena's joke. What's green and sings? Elvis parsley. And Billy has a question. Let me see where it is. No, he just gave a thought in using tap water removal efficiency.
Wow.
So it's a lot of words I can't say.
That sounds like something from a paper that showed how biochar could remove all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I know it removes fluoride. So I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry to say I don't really know that much about chlorine.
Now, biochar in containers. I think that's really, really interesting, because nothing's gonna, when you have containers and you get water all in it, it kind of leaves. You have biochar in a container, it should not leave, correct?
Well, no, it's going to leave. But here's an experiment you can do just to see about the water holding capacity of biochar. And it's always a combination of what the biochar holds and then what's held in between the particles. So that'll depend somewhat on your soil. Like sandy soil is going to be draining. Clay soil is going to hold more water. Biochar will improve sandy soil, but what you could do is get a couple of pots and make one soil mix with biochar in it and one without. Plant some tomatoes, water them till they're a nice size, and then stop watering them. Don't let the rain get on them. Just stop watering them. See which one survives longer.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll show you how much biochar can hold water in the soil. But the plants are going to use it, and it's not going to keep it there forever. So, but it will keep your soil wetter for longer.
Cucumbers require a lot of water, so I'm anxious to see what this biochar is going to do.
Imagine your squash.
Yeah.
We have that biggest zucchini contest. Think biochar.
Yeah.
In 3 days, we go from things like this until things like that.
Well, it's not a miracle. You know, I grow a really good garden. I think one of the real benefits of biochar is that it does seem to do a good job with keeping plants healthy. And that's because it's like that gut biome, right? You want the healthy gut, you want a healthy soil, you want diversity. And so the biochar is going to help your plants be healthier overall. I never get any soil fungal diseases at all. And, you know, fusarium, I've never gotten anything like that. I think biochar is really good at that. But I don't think it's probably going to make your plants grow giant or anything. You know, for that you need to just keep adding fertilizer. So I think it just makes your gardening easier in a lot of ways. But you're still going to have to pull weeds.
Yeah.
The weeds are easier to pull, though, because the soil's a lot looser. You know, the soil's just like, you can stick your hand right into it, you know.
Yeah.
You know, up to here without having to dig. It's not compacted. So it's nice loose soil. The weeds will pop out a lot easier. And you know, it'll stay moist a little longer. It'll be healthy. It won't stop the cabbage worms, though.
Think cover crops. Think cover crops.
Yeah.
Lots of cover crops. Well, thank you thank you everyone from LinkedIn for joining in us today in the discussion and following us and watching after the fact. We have people all over the world watching. We appreciate that. Thank everybody, all our members for becoming members. And thank you everyone for following Grow Big TV. Future is bright here. We're growing big. I hope we get you growing big, and hopefully, again, the motto: healthy soil, healthy plant, healthy you, healthy world. So we'll see you guys on Sunday Funday. I hope you guys can check out Sunday Funday and Garden State Gardener. And we'll be back on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. So stay here for 1 second. And everybody else, everybody have a good evening. Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.